Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and strength coach, and I specialize in vestibular disorders. Welcome to my channel, The Steady Coach. Today we're going to be talking about fatigue and brain fog. These are two very common symptoms that occur with any kind of vestibular disorder, but can be particularly problematic for people with chronic dizziness symptoms because you're suffering from chronic dizziness symptoms for a while. So whether you have PPPD or MdDS or any other form of chronic dizziness symptoms, you may have had an encounter or more than one encounter with fatigue and brain fog. So first we're going to talk about why this happens, and then we're going to talk about some strategies you can use for combating the fatigue that you're experiencing. So the common explanation you'll typically hear for why fatigue is so very common with chronic dizziness disorders and other dizziness disorders is that when you have a vestibular disorder, your brain has to work extra hard. To remind you guys, your balance system relies on information from 3 different senses: your eyes, your inner ears, and your sense of touch or your proprioception. This is actually a very complex process, and there are many brain areas that are involved in this processing, unlike for some of our other senses that complete their processing in one primary area of the brain. So the issue when you have a vestibular disorder is either that your brain is getting faulty information from the senses involved in the balance system, or that the brain has faulty expectations of what it should be getting from the senses. So I think that first mechanism might be a little easier to understand, but I'll explain both, don't worry. So in the first, you actually have a sensory issue. Your brain is looking for a certain amount of information coming in from your eyes, your ears, and your sense of touch, but it's not getting that information because one of the senses is disturbed. Every time that happens, your brain has to use a whole bunch of extra processing power just to try to figure out and make sense of the information that it's getting from the senses. This can lead to fatigue because your brain is working a lot harder than it should. For the second mechanism, I said that your brain might have mispredictions or faulty predictions. And this is the case for many of you guys who have chronic dizziness disorders. Your brain has a set of expectations about what information it should be getting from your senses, but those expectations are incorrect. So even though it's getting stable information from all of the senses involved in the balance system, your brain isn't processing that information correctly. It expects one thing, but it's getting something else. And when there's a mismatch like that, your brain has to work really hard to try to figure out what is causing the discrepancy. It takes time to adjust, and it takes brain power to adjust. And you may have actually noticed this if you have PPPD, that there seems to be a strange lag between when something happens and when your brain seems to catch up. That's actually happening. Your brain is spending a lot more energy and a lot more time than it normally would trying to figure out what's going on in your environment because it's confused about the sensory information that's coming in. So all of these vestibular explanations make sense and might help you understand why fatigue is so common for people with really any kind of vestibular disorder. That being said, I think these explanations miss a really important part of the picture in that they don't really take into account what's happening in your nervous system. So as we've discussed very extensively on my channel, I view neural circuit dizziness or chronic dizziness symptoms that are occurring without any kind of medical explanation as a result of the brain being in threat mode or danger mode. I've said in previous videos that when your brain is in danger mode, it's much more likely to interpret normal sensations as dangerous and therefore bring your attention to them. And I've also said that your brain's much more likely to make errors in its predictions when it's in danger mode. But here's another effect of danger mode. This might surprise you, but your brain actually has a natural braking system already built in. And by braking system, what I mean is that your brain can make you feel tired and force you to sit down on your bottom even when there's nothing actually wrong. So there's no better illustration of this than research on people who like to run long distances. So you may have heard the term hitting the wall, which is when you're running a long distance and you suddenly feel awful, like you really need to stop, like something's very wrong. And that seems to correspond with your brain's natural braking system, noticing that you're starting to get low on energy. In other words, the energy sources within your body are being depleted. And at some point, before you actually hit the point where your energy is actually gone, your brain has this natural braking system that it activates to try to get you to stop moving. It's a protective mechanism. So our brain already has a circuit that does this. And what we know about this braking system is, like other circuits in the brain, it's plastic. Your brain adjusts that circuit. It adjusts when it turns on that brake, depending on how much danger it thinks you're in, or based on how much danger it thinks you need to recover from. So coming back to danger mode in the brain, if you have chronic dizziness symptoms, I guarantee you that you are in danger mode at least some of the time. Your brain is more likely to hit the brakes and either try to make you stop so you stop getting into danger, or to make you stop to recover from this danger that your brain has been perceiving. Again, both of those are just opinions of the brain. Your brain just thinks that there was danger or that there is danger, but the braking system is still going to be activated because your brain is trying to protect you. And just a little note here that sometimes people will experience fatigue specifically when they are in the process of recovery. And in the mind-body community, this is actually a well-known phenomenon even for people who don't have any kind of vestibular issue. And the theory here is that when you're rewiring your brain, first of all, again, that is a tiring process. You're working on changing your brain, and that is energy consuming, so that can bring on some fatigue. But sometimes also when you're doing the emotional work that I talk about here on my channel and I'll mention in this video, there's a theory that you're also causing the release of a bunch of stress chemicals. And as those stress chemicals start to come down because you're doing the emotional work, your brain starts to hit a new, lower, better baseline of stress chemicals. If you've been flying high on stress chemicals for a while and suddenly the level goes down, your body is going to feel a bit fatigued until you adjust to the new baseline. So again, these are more theoretical than proven fact, but good concepts to think about if you're experiencing fatigue specifically and only during the recovery process as you're digging in. So don't take that as a sign that you're doing the wrong things. So you may be saying to yourself now, oh my gosh, there are so many reasons why I'm fatigued. How in the world am I going to get better from this? So don't worry, we're going to talk now about 3 suggestions I have for how to deal with this fatigue. And I'm going to start, before I go into my 3, by saying, of course, the usual stuff applies. Getting regular sunlight, trying to get good sleep at night, good nutrition, and as much movement as you can are all going to help with fatigue. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to work through fatigue in a neural circuit dizziness specific way. So the first and most important thing is understanding this so that we can turn your danger mode down in your brain. Because as we've already established, danger mode is why the brakes are being turned on in the first place. So this should be our primary target, turning down danger mode. And this is how we do it. We turn down danger mode by you watching videos like this and understanding what's happening. Understanding that you are not broken. Your brain is not broken. As long as you've had the medical and imaging tests that you should have, and medical things have been ruled out, You do not have some kind of rare, invisible neurological disease that can't be diagnosed. Your brain and nervous system are functioning in a completely normal way. They're just over-responding. And by correcting that over-response, you can go back to feeling better. Most likely you are not being affected by toxins or mold or any of those things. Your brain is just being overzealous about the danger response. And when we get you out of danger mode, you are not going to have the brakes put on and you are going to have less fatigue. The second recommendation I have is to do your best not to avoid activity. And I'm not saying that if you have deep bone-crushing fatigue that I want you to just pretend it's not there and go run a marathon. I think you do need to listen to your body and respect it when it's got the brakes on. Pushing through isn't necessarily going to help you. But avoiding activity because you anticipate being tired afterwards, that is going to again increase the danger response in the brain. So in my free course on chronic dizziness, I talk about a technique called pacing that you can use, which is when you start to add a little bit of activity over time to let your body acclimate. You can do something like that if you like, or you can play it by ear, so to speak, and participate in activities as you feel good. But again, we want to try to not get stuck in this cycle of avoidance of activities, because when you do that, again, you're increasing danger mode. And when you increase danger mode, you're also increasing the potential for fatigue, as the braking system is going to be more likely to kick on. The final thing, the third thing to think about here is your stress bucket. And we've talked about the stress bucket in previous videos that I will link to in the video description. So as we've talked about in previous videos, all forms of stress go into your bucket. And when the bucket overflows, when you can't deal with the stress anymore, when your nervous system goes into full out danger mode, that's when we have symptoms happen. And that's also, in the context of this video, when the fatigue system, when the braking system is going to kick on. So one misconception that I think people have sometimes is when they hear me say you have a stress bucket, and when your stress bucket overflows, it causes all this bad stuff. They think I mean that you can't handle stress. And that's actually not at all what I'm saying. I think you can handle a lot of stress, but it's about two things. First, right now you're at capacity. If you have a lot of symptoms, if you have a lot of fatigue, it means your stress bucket is at capacity. And if you're in that state, just trying to reduce the stress you can is going to be beneficial. That said, you can get more bang for your buck with some kinds of stress versus others. Now, lifestyle changes may help. Making sure you're not getting yelled at by your boss may help. Addressing the normal causes of stress can help. But the second component of stress is how you are responding to stress internally. And in my opinion, that plays a much bigger role in how much stress goes in your bucket at the end of the day. An example I'll often give in my membership community is if you have two identical people who work exactly the same job and have exactly the same lifestyle, but one of them was yelled at a lot as a kid and the other one wasn't, who's gonna have a stronger stress response to being yelled at? The one with the history of being yelled at, because that person's nervous system is more finely tuned to being yelled at. And I'm not saying, by the way, that that person is gonna freak out or is gonna have an outward sign of stress that's different from the other person. I'm saying that person's nervous system is going to be more activated. So I want you not just to think of the stress that's in your life right now, but how you're reacting to your stress and how your history might be affecting how you're responding to stress. We've talked in previous videos about qualities people have, like people pleasing, like perfectionism, like type A personalities that ramp up the stress in your life because of what's happening inside you. We've talked about emotional experiences from the past, such as trauma, such as difficult experiences earlier in your life that can ramp up the nervous system response to stress. So all of these things are things to think about in this context of fatigue as well, because, as we've talked about previously in this video, the danger response is directly leading to your fatigue. So to summarize that third point, if your brain is putting on the brakes, something is bothering you, and trying to figure out what it is and seeing if you can work through that in one way or another is going to help your brain not be in danger mode and not turn on the fatigue anymore. In other words, try to think emotionally, try to think in terms of your nervous system, try to take it a level beneath the analyses you may have previously made about what things trigger your fatigue. Yes, doing a lot of activities may trigger your fatigue, but was there something about those activities or not that had some kind of emotional significance for you or impacted you maybe in a stronger way because of your background? And in some cases, there's just not going to be an emotional explanation, and that's fine. You can write it off as my brain associates this with danger and it's turning on the brakes. But in my opinion, it's worth doing this digging because, again, if we can take more stuff out of the stress bucket, you're less likely to overflow, go into danger mode, and end up feeling both dizzy and fatigued. I hope this was helpful and informative for you guys. And of course, if you've got comments or questions, please drop them below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like it, please share, and please subscribe to my channel. All right, guys, we'll talk soon.